Imagine standing on the banks of a river teeming not just with water, but with ancient power, witnessing whispers and wonders unseen by the heroes and kings whose names echo through eternity. What if the greatest truths of a legendary war were hidden not in the clash of bronze, but in the currents of a sacred stream, perceived only by a child? Stay with me, because the story we uncover today might just change how you see the myths forever. Welcome, seekers of forgotten lore and hidden histories, to our channel, where we dive deep into the past's most enigmatic corners. Today, we journey back over 3 millennia to the windswept plains of Troy, a city under siege, immortalized in epic poems. But we won't follow Achilles or Hector. Our guide is someone history forgot, Elara, a young girl dwelling near the lifeblood of the Trojan landscape, the Scamander River, known to the gods as Xanthus. She saw more than the dust of chariots and the gleam of swords. She saw the war reflected in the water, felt the pulse of the divine mingling with the mud, a secret world hidden in plain sight. Prepare to see the Trojan War not just as a clash of armies, but as a battleground where nature itself, and the powers within it, held their breath and sometimes intervened. Before we wade into these mystical waters, if you believe history holds more secrets than we're often told, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and perhaps share it with a fellow explorer of the past. Your support fuels our journeys, and trust me, the perspective Elara offers is a revelation you won't want to experience alone. Stick around for insights that connect mythology, nature, and the human spirit in ways you might not expect. Picture the scene. Trojan fields, once fertile, now scarred by a decade of conflict. The mighty walls of Ilium stand defiant against the vast Achaean encampment spread across the plain. The air crackles not just with the tension of war, but with something older, wilder. Down by the Scamander, where reeds whisper secrets to the wind, young Elara watches. She isn't like the other children who play war games mimicking the soldiers. Her gaze follows the eddies and currents, seeing fleeting shapes, shimmering lights the color of river-smooth stones, hearing murmurs beneath the gurgle of the water that sound like sighs or warnings. Her family, simple farmers whose lives are tied to the river's moods, dismiss her tales as daydreams, the fancies of a lonely child living too close to the water's edge, a place known to be touched by the daimons of the wild. They worry, telling her to stay away from the deeper pools, to ignore the strange feelings the river evokes. But Elara can't ignore it. The river speaks to her, not in words, but in sensations, in visions flickering at the edge of her sight. The sorrow of the naiads whose grottos are disturbed by passing patrols, the flicker of anger from the river god himself when blood stains his waters. The war rages on, a relentless tide of men and metal crashing against the shores of Troy. Great heroes perform deeds of legend, their glories and tragedies capturing the attention of mortals and, allegedly, the Olympians above. Down below, however, Elara perceives a different kind of struggle. She feels the land itself groaning under the weight of the endless conflict. She senses the local spirits, the ancient powers tied to this specific place, the river, the springs, the groves, growing restless. They are not the grand gods of Olympus, concerned with fate and glory, but the intimate spirits of the earth, whose domains are being violated. Elara becomes an unwilling confidant to this silent, elemental distress. She sees a wounded Achaean soldier crawl to the riverbank to drink, and feels a cold pulse from the water, a resentment that transcends human allegiances. She watches Trojan women performing cleansing rites, pleading for the river's favor, and senses the water's weary acceptance, strained by the constant pollution of death and despair. Her world is one of profound disconnect. The epic struggle celebrated by poets unfolds alongside a hidden, ecological and spiritual turmoil only she seems to perceive. How can she navigate this? Who would believe the whispers she hears in the ripples, or the sorrow she sees in the clouded depths? This innocent perception, this connection to the unseen, becomes both her gift and her burden in a world consumed by a very visible, very brutal war. She starts to wonder, are the gods just playing games? Or does the river, does the land itself, have its own stake in this fight, its own ancient story unfolding beneath the surface of the human drama. Alara's solitary vigils by the Scamander become her refuge and her burden. As the seasons of war turn, the fighting intensifies, drawing ever closer to the city walls and the riverbanks. The once clear waters now often run murky, not just with silt, but sometimes horrifyingly stained red after major skirmishes. Alara feels the change acutely, like a fever taking hold of a familiar friend. The playful shimmering lights she used to glimpse become frantic, distressed sparks. The low murmurs deepen into groans of pain that resonate in her own small chest. She sees fewer fish darting in the shallows, notices the reeds along the banks growing brittle and gray, coated in the dust of passing armies and the residue of despair. One scorching afternoon, after a brutal clash near the Skyan Gates, the battlefield littered with fallen, Alara watches from her hidden spot as soldiers, both Achaean and Trojan, desperately seek water. They stumble towards the Scamander, their armor stained, their faces grim masks of exhaustion and rage. They plunge their helmets into the current, washing away blood and grime, shouting curses or prayers. But Alara feels something else. She feels the river recoil, not just from physical pollution, but from the sheer weight of human suffering and violence poured into its essence. She witnesses a fleeting, terrifying image reflected in the turbulent water. A vast, watery form rising, bearded with reeds, eyes burning with cold fire. The momentary surfacing of the river god's ancient anger. It vanishes as quickly as it appears, leaving only churning water. But the impression sears itself into Alara's mind. The river is not passive. It is watching, and it is enraged. It's easy for us, in our modern world, to see a river as just moving water. But for the ancients, rivers were alive, powerful entities, often divine. Think of the reverence given to the Nile in Egypt, the Ganges in India, or the numerous river gods like Achilles or Tiberinus in Greek and Roman belief. As the classicist Walter Burkert noted, these weren't just metaphors. They represented potent, localized divinities whose favor was crucial and whose anger was feared. For Alara, living immersed in that worldview, the Scamander wasn't merely landscape. It was a conscious presence, a god whose sanctuary was being desecrated. This growing awareness isolates Alara further. While others lament the lack of rain or the blight on the crops, blaming the war or the distant Olympians, Alara senses the sickness originates closer, from the wounded spirit of the river itself. She tries, in her own childish way, to offer solace. She leaves small offerings, smooth pebbles, wildflowers carefully gathered away from the trampled paths, whispered apologies for the actions of the soldiers. During one such moment, while kneeling at the water's edge near a sacred spring that feeds the Scamander, a spring dedicated to a local nymph, she sees its small pool choked with debris from a collapsed siege mound. As she clears away the refuse, her fingers brush against something cold and unnaturally smooth beneath the mud. A tremor runs through the ground, and a voice, clear as coldest water, yet ancient as stone, echoes not in her ears, but directly in her mind. They poison the source, they forget the pack's balance is broken. The voice fades, leaving Alara trembling, not just with fear, but with the terrifying weight of understanding. The spirits are not just passive victims, they feel betrayed. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of the world around us do we ignore? What powers, what consciousness might reside in nature that we've simply forgotten how to perceive? Share your thoughts below. Do you believe places can hold memory or energy? The encounter at the spring marks a turning point. Alara is no longer just a passive observer. She feels complicit, burdened by a knowledge she cannot share. The voice, the warning about broken packs and poisoned sources, haunts her. She starts noticing things she hadn't before. Sickly animals avoiding the river, strange phosphorescence on the water at night, an unnatural chill emanating from the deepest pools, even under the summer sun. And then she sees him, one of the great heroes, Achilles himself, blazing like a vengeful star, slaughtering Trojans relentlessly, driving them back, forcing them into the protesting waters of the Scamander. She feels the river's fury gathering, a pressure building like a thunderstorm. and she understands with chilling certainty. The river is about to fight back. The war of men is about to face the wrath of something far older. What will happen when a god of nature unleashes his power upon the battlefield? Achilles, seemingly invincible, a force of destruction clad in celestial armor, cares nothing for the sanctity of the river. He leaps into the Scamander, sword flashing, cutting down fleeing Trojans trapped in the current. The water churns red, choked with bodies, shields, and broken spears. From her hiding place, Elara watches in horror, but her fear of the warrior is overshadowed by the terrifying vibration underfoot, the deep thrumming resonance coming from the riverbed itself. It's the sound of millennia of patience snapping. The whispers she used to hear are gone, replaced by a rising roar that drowns out the cries of men. Then it happens. The Scamander rises, not like a normal flood, but with terrifying speed and unnatural intent. The current surges, forming whirlpools that snatch at the legs of soldiers. Waves crest high, shaped like claws, crashing down upon Achilles. Elara sees the water itself seem to gain substance. Terrifying. Fluid form lifting from the river, the embodiment of the furious god she glimpsed before. Xanthus, the divine Scamander, is manifest. He roars, his voice the sound of boulders grinding and torrents crashing, a sound that shakes the very air. He calls out to Achilles, accusing him of defiling his sacred waters, of choking his streams with corpses. My lovely currents are clogged with the dead. The booming voice echoes across the plain, a sound Elara feels in her bones. I cannot find my way to the salt sea, jammed with your slaughter. Leave me, Prince Achilles. You horrify me. Elara is frozen, not by fear alone, but by overwhelming awe. This is the power she sensed, the ancient consciousness now unleashed. She sees the god, a whirlwind of water, debris, and fury engulf Achilles. The mighty hero, slayer of Hector, is suddenly struggling, fighting against an element, against the raw power of the outraged earth. He's thrown back, engulfed by waves filled with the bodies of those he just killed. The river pursues him across the plain, relentless, churning tide that sweeps away everything in its path. Men, horses, weapons. Elara ducks lower, hidden behind a cluster of ancient tamarisks, feeling the spray, hearing the terrifying roar of the god, the screams of drowning men. She sees the river rip trees from their roots, tossing them like twigs. It's chaos, primordial power unleashed, a god of nature reminding mortals of their insignificance. A stunned silence falls over the parts of the battlefield untouched by the flood. Achaeans and Trojans alike lower their weapons, staring in disbelief and terror at the spectacle. This is no mere battle strategy. This is divine wrath made manifest. Whispers spread like wildfire. Xanthus, the river god, fights. Old fears surface. Prayers are muttered to Poseidon, to any god who might intervene. The carefully constructed reality of human warfare shatters against the undeniable power of the enraged river. If you've journeyed this far with Elara, witnessing this terrifying display of divine power, comment below. What do you think this moment reveals about the relationship between humanity, nature, and the divine in the ancient world? But the clash of gods is rarely simple, as Scamander relentlessly pursues the desperate Achilles, threatening to drown him and wash away the Achaean presence entirely. The very air begins to shimmer with heat. Another power intervenes. From the heavens, urged by Hera to protect her favorite hero, descends a terrifying wave of fire. Hephaestus, the divine smith, answers the river's flood with celestial flame. Elara watches in renewed horror as the plain ignites. The fire god's blaze scorches the earth, boils the river water, consumes the trees, the reeds, even the bodies floating in the flood. The roar of the river god turns into a shriek of agony as steam rises in vast clouds, choking the air. Scamander, overwhelmed by divine fire, finally relents, his waters receding, boiling and steaming, leaving behind a scarred, scalded landscape littered with the dead and the debris of both flood and fire. Elara finds herself trapped between the smoldering earth and the violated river, the battle momentarily paused by this terrifying elemental duel. The immediate threat of the flood is gone, But the world has irrevocably changed. The gods have shown their hand. Nature itself is wounded and enraged, and Troy still stands, defiant but trembling. Elara knows the end is near. The final, brutal act of the war approaches, heralded by this terrifying clash of divine powers. What horrors await in the final days of Troy? And how will a girl who feels the pain of the land survive the inferno to come? The shadow of a giant horse begins to loom in the minds of men, but Elara feels only the lingering heat on the ravaged ground and the deep, simmering resentment flowing in the weakened currents of the weakened Scamander. The eerie quiet following the battle of the gods does not last. Though the river flows weakly, steaming in places, its power momentarily broken, the war of mortals grinds on. Days blur into nights filled with the clang of bronze, the cries of the wounded, and the ever-present dust. Elara stays close to the diminished river, her senses on high alert. The land feels brittle, expectant, holding its breath. She avoids the city, avoids the camps, finding refuge in scarred landscape that somehow feels safer than the places teeming with desperate humans. She feels the lingering heat from Hephaestus' fire in the earth, a deep scar that mirrors the weariness she senses from the Scamander's depths. Then comes the nightmares made real. The giant wooden horse, an offering of supposed peace, is dragged within the walls Troy had defended for so long. While others celebrate, Elara, near the riverbank outside the city, feels a discordant thrumming in the air, a wrongness that chills her more than the night air. It's not just the unease of the land. It's a deep, guttural fear emanating from the stones of Troy itself. Later, the sounds begin, muffled at first, then sharp cries. The clash of swords not on the battlefield, but within the streets. Flames erupt, painting the night sky orange and red, consuming the proud towers of Ilium. From her vantage point, Elara sees the city die. She hears the screams carried on the wind, smells the acrid smoke that stings her eyes and throat. But she also feels something else through her connection to the place, the agony of the city itself, the final violation. She senses the ancient stones weeping, the ground saturated not just with blood, but with terror and betrayal. The river beside her seems to groan, too weak now for fury, capable only of sorrow, its current sluggishly reflecting the inferno. Panic grips her. Should she flee? Where? The Achaeans are everywhere. As the fires rage and the sounds of slaughter intensify, a strange instinct guides her, a pull towards a specific, overgrown part of the riverbank downstream, away from the burning city. It's not a voice this time, but a persistent, gentle urging, a feeling emanating from the water itself, like the faint memory of the nymph's presence she felt before. She follows it, scrambling through thorns and mud, the roar of the sack fading slightly behind her. The river guides her to a small, hidden inlet, almost a cave, masked by willow branches trailing into the water. There, huddled in the damp earth, listening to the distant echoes of destruction and the sorrowful murmur of the Scamander, Elara survives the night. She doesn't see the final moments of the heroes, the tragic fates of the royal family. She experiences the fall of Troy as the land experienced it, a deep, searing wound, a violation of sacred space. When dawn breaks, revealing a landscape of utter devastation and smoke rising from the ruins, Elara is alone, a small, silent witness carrying the memory of not just a fallen city, but of the wounded, conscious earth and the whispers of its forgotten spirits. What Elara carried away from Troy wasn't just a trauma of survival, but a profound, world-altering understanding. History remembers the warriors, the kings, the strategies, the treachery of the horse. But Elara knew the deeper truth promised at the start. The Trojan War was also fought by the river, felt by the stones, witnessed by the spirits of place whose names were never recorded in the epics. She understood that the world is alive in ways we have forgotten, that nature holds memory, and that the cost of human conflict is paid not just in blood, but in the desecration of these ancient, living connections. Her perspective, the viewpoint of a child attuned to the whispers of the unseen, reveals the layers beneath the legend, the ecological grief, the spiritual violation hidden behind the heroic narratives. The greatest revelation isn't a secret fact, but a way of seeing, recognizing the vibrant consciousness within the world around us, consciousness that suffers our conflicts and remembers long after the victors write their tales. Elara's story fades back into the mists of time, a whisper like those she heard by the river, but her experience echoes, a call to listen closer, to perceive more deeply, to remember the forgotten voices and the silent witnesses of history. It challenges us to consider what energies, what stories, lie dormant in the landscapes we inhabit today. If this journey into the hidden corners of the past moved you, if you felt the resonance of Elara's connection and the power of the unseen world, please show your support. Subscribe to continue exploring these forgotten narratives. Like this video if it sparked your curiosity, and share your reflections in the comments below. What part of Elara's unique perspective resonated most with you? Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching and for listening to The Whispers.